Hello. I'm making this video because recently I stopped using this bad boy. This is the RC-505 MK1. I pretty much use this for my entire career and, was really successful kind of using this as my main focal point of my studio. And recently an app came out called Loopy Pro, which is a, iOS-based loop station, and it is fully customizable. It has a whole bunch of support from its own community, and the developer is active in interacting with people that use his loop station. His name is a Tasty Pixel, and I decided to give it a try, and when I did, it made me realize how archaic this is as a loop station. Now, I'm going to kind of describe why I don't use this anymore and give like a brief description and show you why I like Loopy Pro. I'm going to go into like a more in-depth like studio thing soon because people have been asking me like what my current setup is, and I would love to show you guys. So if you're not a nerd about music, this might not be the best video for you, but if you are, stay. Basically, this thing is great if you're a freestyle looper. Now what that means is, for me, when I loop, I go, and that is looping. So it's like having that immediately, I like to have quick, concise loops that are like 1/8 of a fucking measure. And the MK2, the reason why I didn't switch to the MK2 has issues with that, because there's a sequencer in it that basically force gates you to have like a full measure on every single one of these. So you can't do like a 1/8 measure, which for me, I like doing. It's how I start my loops. It's how if I'm like, and I do that, and then I go, I'll do that, and it's a quick loop aiding that, but it's the same sound constantly, which I think sounds good sonically. So that's why I don't use the MK2. Why I don't use this anymore is that there's a horrible limiter in here. What that means is that this limits everything to 0 dB. And when you have an extremely loud source on here, right, it completely drowns out everything else miserably. The looper in this, or the limiter in this, is like extremely archaic. And I found myself always having to like turn down everything I had being sent out to this, which means I couldn't mix anything that I was sending to this extremely like, in 32-bit point depth, exactly the same as it sounds on my Ableton, it'll sound on this. It was always like I had to push and pull everywhere in order to get this to sound good and to get this to sound exactly how it sounded on my computer. That was a big issue for me, man. I found myself not being able to do all of my instruments and not being able to mix on my computer and understand how it's going to sound here. And there was just a big discrepancy in the signal between my Ableton, which is what I use to, mix and route all of my instruments out into the stereo into this. Also, there's just like a blatant amount of issues with like synchronization on here, where sometimes if you stop, playing and then you press it again, this will be in sync with the loop, but then all of these will get pushed like a quarter measure up. So then all of a sudden your loop station is broken. And in order to make songs that you save on here, you can't stop it. You can't like create stops sometimes if you're freestyle looping, and you can't start it. So you have to like start it, have it be messed up, and then singularly replace the loop so it's in sync with this one. That was a big issue for me when I was doing like Omegle videos, and I needed to have something that I could save in order to like, have part of my song just be ready to go. So that's why I stopped using this. I think this is a great piece of hardware for anybody. I forgot one thing. The biggest reason I stopped using this is that they're no longer made. They're no longer supported by Boss. They're no longer supported by Roland. You can't get this repaired properly. You have to go to like a secondary repair center. They won't even fix these anymore. Like realistically, they might if you pay them enough and you get in the contact with the right person. But at what point is it worth it to be like, hey, as a touring musician or as someone who relies on this for, my entire life and my my livelihood as I do, what's the point of not even being able to get a new one if it breaks? And every single RC-505 MK1 that I've had is broken in some way, shape, or form. Like this no longer works. This is completely broken. If I turn up the volume on this one, then all of these get turned up. And if I turn it down, all of these get turned down. Just weird circuit board issues that if I try to get it fixed, there also wasn't many like repair centers in the Midwest of America. And I'm sure that maybe there's more other places, but here for sure, there's not many. So I also didn't like I hate the ability of how this records as a USB interface. I want to be able to record all of my tracks and be able to mix them in post, because sometimes imagine you have this great song. Just imagine if you could record each of these Loopstation tracks in Ableton. It would be amazing. The RC-505 MK2 kind of gives you the option to do that. And where the where the MK2 really shines is like the limiter's nicer. You have crazier effects, you have sequencers, you have auto-tune, you have all these things. But the problem with me and my setup is when I think of all those things, I would much rather program them in Ableton, because that's the first point of contact that I have, and then send it out to something. And when you send it out to something that's limiting it, in just like a kind of non-conventional high quality limiter, or it's not high quality, then you run into so many issues with how your reverb sound and how your tail sound and the decay on certain things, and like your bass being too loud when it comes in and then sounding quieter, like I had a lot of issues with that. And there's a reason why you don't see a lot of Loopstation artists using the MK2. And when it comes to Loopstation artists that are like using instruments, a lot of them use the MK1. But that's why I stopped using it. Lack of support. I don't like how, you have to do bus effects combined. Like I wish I could do one bus effect or track effects on these two, and then have this effect be on this one, and then this one has just one bus track effect, this one has two, and then this one has a different one from these two. Like that's a cool thing, because imagine you want to do like a slicer on a bass that's synced to your initial track, but you also want to add a small amount of reverb to it, but you also don't want a slicer on this, you just want to have this thing have reverb on it. You were unable to do that with this, and it created a lot of issues in terms of like always sounding the same. And everybody who used this thing and did certain effects with it, it sounds the same, whether you're a beatboxer or, you're doing a filter that all sounds the same. You don't have much control over like the creativity that so many other plugins, in the AUV3 or in the VST environment can give you, that this will never have. So that's why I stopped using it. It's great for like parties and when I like do karaoke, I guess I'll use this, which is a crazy use of a $500 piece of gear, but we're here, my studio. So yeah. And to people that want to buy one of these and the MK2, I'm sure the MK2 might be fixed. When I sold my MK2 about a year and a half ago or a year ago, and it had the current firmware it has, it was still having issues with like sync. It was still having issues with like free measures. It was having issues with like quick looping. Maybe that's how I would describe myself the best as, is I want to have something that is a fully fleshed out song within 10 seconds. And if you watch my streams, if you watch, even my videos, when I loop, I can get things done almost seamlessly, super quick. And this had so many issues with that, even though it was the best at it. So that's why I moved to Loopy Pro. Loopy Pro, although it still does have issues with its like algorithmic way of trying to decide what your loop is when you do it, Loopy Pro has so much more customizable ways to deal with it that it kind of makes this feel so old to me. And that's what I felt when I first downloaded Loopy Pro. And I'm kind of showing you my setup on Loopy Pro. It's very basic. And I use this with this is all color coded. So it's color coded to my APC 40, right? And then I have multiple things on here. Like right here, this is my PC. I can sample my PC sounds with this. I could sample my own sounds with this. So it's like, I could be like, ha, 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 and I could throw that into a loop. And what I like about Loopy Pro is that you could set each one of these colors to have like not only different measures, like as you can see on my yellow, I have 16 bars, I have 8 bars, I have 4 bars and 2 bars, but you can set these to all have different bus effects. And then you can also give each of those bus effects to certain things, and then you can MIDI map all of those things using like a MIDI twister, a MIDI fighter, or even your APC40. I also have a Kai LPD8 that I'm going to start using for certain toggles as well. So you also have sends on here. Something that, you know, isn't on the RC-505s is the ability to have parallel processing. And what that means is you send a dry signal to something, and then you add reverb or add compression or add something to it after that. So you still have your dry signal in the mix, but you just add on top of it, like, you know, reverb, and it's a little bit more in your left and right ears. It's like, it like comes from here into here, rather than when you have a direct reverb, which is where you have a 100% dry signal, and then you start to, like, you know, you have, I don't know how to describe this right now, but like, you know, here's your dry signal at 100%, and then you start taking a whole bunch of your wet, and it takes out the dry signal, and then that comes from almost like, if you're talking about listening to it, it comes from the middle out. I like having the ability to parallel process, because I think that having dry signal in a lot of your stuff creates kind of a present sound, and that was just a little selling point for Loopy Pro. I can literally talk about Loopy Pro and what I'm going to do with it for hours. I've spent probably 40 hours on this template. I originally got it from DubFX, who's just he has an amazing video on Loopy Pro. I'll put it in the description maybe. You can just look it up, honestly. Who cares? Just look up DubFX Loopy Pro. But he talks about how you could just kind of have your own setup here, but have effects on everything. So like I'll show you some examples of why this is better, in my opinion. You have things like, I have a UA basement, right? So that what this does is it's a like a bass clarity, adds more bass to your template, right? You can go and it adds like a whole undertone of bass to that, kind of like R bass, which is a waves plugin that people use in everything to create subsonic bass that might not be present in the initial dry signal. So like, I'll use that. This also has something called TB barricades. TB barricades is a very high quality limiter. And what this allows me to do is like, I could limit everything I have with True Peak, and I could, it's like 3 milliseconds of latency, maybe 2 milliseconds. And you just have this extremely high quality limiter that you can actually use. You could also take it off, and then you could mix everything to be completely balanced if you want to. I find that to be really hard, because if you have 50 different things on something, it's going to be hard to, like, if it's hitting 0 dB, it's going to be hard to mix it, right? So I also have, like, here's another example on my drum tracks. I have Pro Q. I have a mud control that's a dynamic EQ that basically, you know, on the sides and directly on the bass signal when it's too when it's abrasive, right? Sorry, I'm just showing you crazy stuff right now. Some of you, this is like going off topic, I know, but this is why I like Loopy Pro, is you have this control over things to really create your own sound, but also like dissertate from a completely, like, you can have your own sound and then have a completely different like sonic signature the next day if you just work on it. And that's what's crazy to me. You can't really do that with the Loopstation. You might be able to do different effects, or like, ha, and then turn that into like, or something like that. But you don't have like the finite control. Like, there's things that do this automatically because they're VSTs. They're people that produce, when you have 1,000 different companies making every single little effect and doing things their own way, it's going to sound so much different than when you only have one company that makes one piece of hardware that has their own set of effects only. And that's why this is just going to be the future of looping, in my opinion. Once you use this as a loop artist and you like get a good template and you start using it and you get a little bit more functioning with it, it's addictive. I think about it all the time. I'm like, this is going to be the future. Also, if this breaks, if this iPad breaks, you can save your templates to your Apple Cloud, and you can just get a new iPad if you really need to. You can have Apple Care on this, get a new fucking iPad if you need to. If water spills on it, you're good. If you do that with the RC-505 MK1, guess what? It's going to cost like $900. There's no warranty, and like used ones are just continuously going up in price because they're not in production anymore. So nice, non-broken used ones are just off the shelf right now. So I'll even show you like some other cool things. I have a transient designer on my drum bus. So what that means is that when I'm beatboxing and I'm like, you know, whenever I do any types of drums, this instantly just pushes it to the front. Transient designers are amazing on drum buses. So this creates like, I just have so much options to do crazy stuff. I have side chaining. I have tertiary LFOs. I have, like shimmer verb from Eventide is on this. You can get all of FabFilter stuff. Sound Toys is going to come to this soon. You can get, there's all these beautiful like Logic Pro and, just like small companies. Blias makes great stuff. They have like a granulizer that you can sync to a pad, and then you can have like a granulizer while you beatbox. You could do crazy stuff. The MIDI signal on this is amazing. Like the clock on this is wild. It does exactly what you want to do, which is like first loop capabilities, which is like, and instantly you're locked in at 97, and you can, like, my biggest issue with the RC-505 is like, or MK2, is the lack of being able to do things extremely quickly on like a 1/8 note. So like, I'll show you. Right? So that's a big reason why I use this thing. And once I started even kind of experimenting with it, it made me realize that the future for me is going to be getting into the things that, like, I know so much about weird kind of like non-discussed tech when it comes to music and looping, and I understand a lot of things, and I know how to sync things and put things that are cool, and I get interested in plugins and making things sound cooler and pushing a plugin and being able to mix like a transient designer into a parallel process compressor to make it sound nicer. And like, I can take my actual audio engineering skills, which I think are kind of plentiful, and I could apply it directly to my Loopstation in a creative way that makes me sound exactly how I want to sound, rather than being stuck to a Loopstation that forces me to sound like that Loopstation, whether it be the limiter or the possible effects that they have, or if I send effects into it, that my effects get crushed by its own limiter because it decides to cut off the sides of almost everything I throw into it. This is amazing. This is going to be the future for anybody that's interested in looping. What's even crazier about that is you can, like, eventually it's going to come to Mac. So that means that you can literally just have a Mac that has your entire thing, and you can have multiple controllers connected to your Mac to be able to control Loopy Pro, which this thing already, even with an iPad, which I'm using, eventually I'll use a Mac for it, because it's still in process for being developed for Mac, but it's being, like, even on this iPad, I don't run into many issues with latency or it buffering size. The M2 chip is amazing. The M3 chip is amazing. These chips are going to continue to get wilder, and it's already to a point where even with my current MacBook, I feel like there's no need to upgrade for a long time because it handles everything so well, dude. So that's all. That's why I'm so interested. I could talk about stuff like this forever. If you like listening to me talk about stuff like this, let me know, because I kind of want to start doing tech reviews. Said this a lot. The reason why I don't do them is because it requires a lot of editing. And with this, I had to think about, like, how can I represent all this stuff in a one take, because I like doing it like that. I don't like having to sit here and edit a whole bunch of random stuff and like B-roll and adding cool shots and dolly zooms and stuff like that for like a pair of headphones, you know? Maybe one day I will if I get paid for it, but at the moment it's like I would much rather divert my energy into things that aren't as crazy, and I hope that maybe this review or whatever I'm doing right now is good enough that you guys like it. But yeah, dude, if you're into looping, buy Loopy Pro. You can have it on your phone, and it's still just as intuitive as it would be anywhere else, and you can view it as an investment of like, okay, I'm buying Loopy Pro on my phone. If I like it, then maybe I'll buy an iPad. Maybe I'll get like a Focusrite with my iPad so that I can like put a microphone into my iPad. And it just like, it's going to start that kind of process. And you know, what's crazy too is plugins on iPad Store are so much cheaper than they are in their counterparts, which is like VSTs from the direct company, that you can get like the FabFilter bundle for $120 instead of the $600 it usually is, right? So you have the ability to get cheaper things, to start learning even how to audio engineer and use these things. And there's just so much more like benefits from using this loop station in terms of actually learning how to do things rather than the RC-505. Because something I hated about the RC-505, like one of the main things I hated was when you would try to learn about how did MB14 do this effect? And then that's like, you learn this like unrudimentary way to like get a sound out of this piece of hardware that you can easily achieve just by, I don't know, using a plugin or doing it in Ableton without having to go through like 10 steps where you have to like press this button at this time and do this and do that. And it's maybe cool in a technical sense to be able to do that, for sure. I think it's dope what people are able to do with one piece of hardware. But it comes to a point where like you're literally just programming, and there's not anything fun about that musically for me. I want to be able to be like go and have it be in a trance gate and instantly have something cool, and like just speed and making things on the spot and being able to take my creative ideas and not have so many blockers in between them and programming and twisty buttons and you got to do this and you have to press this button while this button is going, and you have to like, you have to like go to the dinky volume knob or the selection knob and do this like 4 times, I think it's not fun from a music perspective for me to do that and that be like how I represent myself or express my creativity. I don't want to be locked down like that, and I think this gives me the freedom to do whatever the fuck I want. And that's what I think everybody should be striving for, is to have the ability to produce efficiently and also admonish and give the max amount of creativity that you can without being barriered by the ability to seek the sound that you're trying to give to people. And yeah, that's why I don't use the RC-505 anymore. So download Loopy Pro. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do like a full setup guide. It's going to be like an hour-long video. This is already 21 minutes. I don't know. I could talk about this stuff forever. It's like what I'm actually interested in, and I probably seem quite passionate about it, but it's because like, the person behind all the music that you see and like the videos and stuff, this is like what I actually nerdily know about, and this is what I've this is what I've worked on. Mr. Wobbles as a creator and as an idea is meant to be like, I want to eventually be able to do crazy looping stuff that is seamless and integrated, and I want to program my own loop station, and I want to I want to learn how to be like Beardy Man and people like that I really look up to, and is the reason why I'm like living the life I live right now. It's mainly because of like people like Beardy Man and JFB and fucking Reggie Watts and Mark Rebele and all the loop station artists in GBB that I've seen over the years, and all these beatboxers. I want nothing more than to talk about what I've learned just on my own, all the forums I've been through and all that stuff. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Last time I did one of these types of videos, there was like all these angry people that thought I didn't know how to operate a loop station. There's dudes that were like, you gotta like turn tempo sync off on the RC-505 MK2. You don't know what you're talking about. It's kind of pathetic. You're talking crap on this, and let me show you my video of how to fix it. And then the video explains nothing, and it just shows me that they're like incompetent and even understanding what I was complaining about, which goes to show the level of like, intelligence they have about the loop station world and like looping in general. And then you look at their channel and they make like acid rock in C pentatonic for 2 hours on stream. That's just like the same constant thing with like a filter effect that they do every 2 minutes. It's wild, dude. I'm going to say this pretty abruptly. Listen to me. Just listen to me. Get Loopy Pro. I think that my credentials are pretty strong and I know what I'm talking about. And that's all. I need to turn the video off, dude. Jesus. This was supposed to be 10 minutes, man. I'm going to go.